that is incredibly arid, incredibly sparsely populated. And what that basically means is that people live so far apart from one another that there's almost no access to medical care. There's something like one physician for 16,000 people, and that physician is so far away that you can't get to them when you need them. And there's almost no access to even elementary education. And when this woman was a child, she never even had the benefit of any schooling. She had no ability to read or to calculate, and neither did her mom, whom she lived with. And, sorry, there you go, that's okay. What this also means is that many, many people in Sudan give birth without the benefit of any kind of skilled labor assistant because they're alone, they live very far away, and they can't get to anyone when they need them. And when this woman was 13 years old, she found herself alone with her mom when her mom went into labor with her baby sister, and she did not know what to do, and things didn't go well, and she basically could only stand by and watch as her mom and her baby sister died in front of her. And as she began to make sense of that experience over time, she realized that even though she had never even been to school at all, she wanted to do something about this problem. She thought this wasn't right. And she decided she wanted to be an obstetrician who could help other women in Sudan. But she had no opportunity for pursuing that dream at all. Until 2 years later, when she was 15, she heard tell of a family from Cambridge, England. The mom was a sociologist and the dad was an anthropologist, and they had come with their 2 school-age girls to rural Sudan to do field work for 2 years. And she heard of this, and she walked to them miles and presented herself and said, you know, as they say in Africa, I want to be your house girl. I want to, you know, take care of your house for you and get you food and cook for you and, you know, take care of you 2 girls during the day while you're working. And so they hired her on. And over the course of that 2 years, every day as those 2 little girls would sit down with their British school books to do their work, she would have them explain to her what they were learning and teach her what was in their books. And over the course of that 2 years, those 2 little girls taught her basically the rudiments of an elementary education in Britain. They taught her how to read, they taught her basic calculation skills. And when the family was due to return to England at the end of 2 years, they were so taken with her that they offered to support her and to bring her back to England with them so she could continue her education. And amazingly, she mustered the courage to go, to leave everything that was familiar with her to her in the service of this dream she had. So she went back to England, and to make a long story short, she went through the British elementary education system as a young adult, and then she went on to secondary school and university and medical school, and she eventually became a fully trained and certified obstetrician gynecologist in Europe. And at that point, she could have very easily stayed in Europe and led a very affluent life and still worked for the cause of her native Sudan, but she didn't. She returned to Sudan, where she now operates a mobile health clinic for women in the most remote parts of Sudan and teaches them how to safely care for one another during pregnancy and childbirth and postnatal period. So I just ask you the simple question, when you look at this woman, now that you know something about her circumstances, how does she make you feel? What does she make you think about? You can answer if you want.
Yeah.
Inspired.
Inspired. What do you mean by inspired?
That she can go on to achieve such great things from a humble beginning. And maybe we could have all extended ourselves a little more.
Yeah? Anybody else want to say? Exactly.
Admire.
You admire her. How so? What do you mean by that?
It seemed to be an unreachable goal.
Yeah.
And yet, she took a little step and kept going.
Yeah. It seems like an unreachable goal, but you admire her for overcoming that obstacle.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel inspired by her accomplishments and her dedication, and then in turn you think about maybe we could all do something like that and go a little further, is what the other woman said. Anybody else want to add anything?
I was wondering
Yeah.
why she would have so much inspired motivation
Yeah. Where does her determination come from?
The sense of belief in herself, somewhere. She might not have identified that, but
Yeah.
she obviously believed that she could do something that would...
Right. She sort of had the daringness to dream that this could be possible, right? Without worrying about how. She just wanted to do it, and she just one step in front of the other. Okay. So now if I take my storytelling hat off and put on my scientist hat, I can tell you that this is one of the true stories that I compiled, and my team compiled, from around the world, that is meant as an emotion induction story in my experiments. Okay? And I've told you this story for a couple of reasons. First, pedagogically, it helps you to understand what I'm actually studying for you to experience it. It makes much more sense now, the neural data that I'm going to show you. And then also, because I think she's just a wonderful example of exactly what we're trying to achieve. And so what you've just given away with your answers is that feeling emotions about other people involves the feeling of your own self. The way we understand and appreciate someone else's accomplishments as being amazing or as being compassion-inducing is by comparing them to our own condition. And this really wasn't known before I began doing this work. There were people sort of hinting at it, but nobody had actually shown that empirically this is what happens. When I ask people, how does her story make you feel in my experiments, and I don't say anything else, what they say is all the stuff you said about her and what happened and how, and then they spontaneously, very often, turn it back on themselves and say, and so what should I be doing with my life? I want to be a better person with my life. What could I learn from her? They don't say that word, but what could I learn from her that would help me to be a better person here? Now, notably, they usually don't say, I want to go to Sudan too and help her, right? Although I have to tell you, some of the younger participants do that, right? It's like sort of a confusion that you move from actions up into the mental implications of those actions. So the youngest participants we've tested with this paradigm now are 18, and the 18 and 19-year-olds are more likely to say stuff like that than the 26-year-olds or the 57-year-olds who never say stuff like that, okay? But what I'm going to show you is just exactly what my little nephew here is revealing visually to us as he looks at his mom, my sister, taking this picture of him in the mirror, right? We understand other people by reflecting off of our own self. And the purpose of education is, in its essence, to learn to do that more and more effectively in more and more skilled and nuanced ways. In essence, to develop the possibility cognitively of holding many, many selves. Selves that are really selves you would be, and selves that allow you to understand and take the perspective of someone you hope you never would be. I mean, the way I described it yesterday is, if you want to understand why those guys, in September of 2001 crashed airplanes into New York City buildings, you can't just hate them over there. You need to actually hold in mind a sense and build in your own mind a sense of who they were and why they did that, why they believed that was the thing to do, and what kind of cultural and social experiences framed that belief system for them. And then you can start to get inside it and change things from the bottom up in accordance with your own personal belief systems, which, at least in my case, is that you really should not, send airplanes into buildings and kill other people for your own convictions. Okay? But you can't just distance yourself. An educated person is educated by virtue of the fact that they can build and understand multiple kinds of perspectives at once. Hold those in mind, relate those to one another, and then use those to extract abstract information about what this means for the world, just exactly like you did when you gave away your answers, where it's not her story in Sudan teaches you something about Sudan, but it doesn't stop there. What it really does is help you to understand something about the general nature of humanity. What makes people in general be able to do those kinds of things? That's what I want to know, you asked, right? Not, who is she? How can I go find her, right? It's about extracting the generalizable information and using that to learn and to shape the possibility of future directions that you can take, and having the skills to do that. That's what education is about. And no matter what skills you're talking about, math skills, engineering skills, design skills, social skills, emotion regulation skills, physics skills, writing skills, literary analysis skills, all those skills are there in the service of that goal. They're in the service of you being able to build and understand and represent and appreciate multiple ways of understanding and measuring and predicting things in the real world. And then using that to be able to skillfully design a path into the future that will be useful for us and moral for us and helpful to people. Does that make sense? Okay. So, what is that a picture of? I'll tell you right now, it's not me, it's my sister. I don't show pictures of myself in my own presentations. It's kind of embarrassing. This is my sister with my niece, Nina, meeting each other for the first time. Nina was the smaller of two twins. She's about 3 3/4 pounds in that picture, and about an hour and a half old. And what do you notice about her already, right? Sorry? That's right. She's looking straight at her mother. But what is her mother doing to support her in being able to do that? She's holding her head at just the right angle. She's supporting her in every way. She says, don't worry about your flailing limbs that you can't control yet. I'll get those in for you, okay? We're good about that, okay? I'll support you in every single other thing you need. And you're fed, and your diaper's changed, and you're warm enough, and everything else is here. And now, let's do it, right? Now we can look at each other. Now we can bond with each other. And Nina is also asking for what she needs from her mom. She's driving that social interaction also. They both come to this looking for it. Did somebody tell my sister, you know, when you meet newborn infants, they really can only see very well at about, 10 inches or so distance. So get out the ruler and hold your baby. No, right? Nobody does that. Why does she automatically do that? She's holding her at exactly her foveation distance because she's getting subtle, non-conscious feedback cues from her infant that, whoa, I'm a little further. Whoa, oh, there you are. Whoop, nope. Oh, yeah, there you are, right? And she adjusts naturally to sustain that social interaction. She supports that infant in being able to engage in a social interaction, but then the infant is also driving and giving feedback saying, yeah, this is what I need from you right now. And so the reason I show this picture is because it demonstrates exactly what I was saying at the very beginning, that our biology is to be social. We come here as a social being onto the planet, and we start from there. And if it doesn't happen right, we end up like the Romanian institutionalized kids, right? We start from there. We start from a place of driving toward establishing a sense of kind of affective empathy and cognitive empathy. We share each other's minds, we engage each other, we ask for what we need, and we drive toward that. That is how we get meaning out of our lives, and that's how our biology develops. Nina comes here with a biological propensity to look for her mom's face or her dad's face or any human being's face, and to stare at their eyes. That's genetic, but that's also social. It's both at once. Do you see what I'm saying? That doesn't stop when you're 2 hours old. That goes for your entire life. That's the entry point. It's another picture of a friend of mine's baby. This is little Dorothea with her grandma. Dorothea is like 2.5 months old here. And what's different about the 2.5-month-old, I'm sorry she's kind of small, these are just snaps that are sent to me by my friends, and I say, can I use that in the talk? And being that they're psychologists, they say, sure. Yeah, what's different about Dorothea than about Nina? Well, thank you very much. I really only need you to hold one of my arms. I can do one and still look at you now, right? I'm getting a more complex ability to manipulate my skills in the world. I can do more than one of them at once. When you're Nina, everything has to be just right, and then I can look at you. But when you're Dorothea, just, can you handle the bottom half of my body? And I'll do the top half of the top half. And not only that, I can do several things at once with the top half. I can look at you, and Grandma again has her at the right distance, right? I can look at you, I can mirror my mouth to the same shape you're doing, and then Grandma's doing it back. I mean, who started it? I don't know, right? And you can imagine they're vocalizing at each other. They look like they're both going, oh, at each other, right? They're looking, they've got their mouths mirrored to one another. Grandma's supporting the whole thing so that the baby can engage, and then the two of them are off and running. And this is what cognitive development looks like. This is the very, very first steps. The baby is coordinating what we call single reflexes. This is Kurt Fisher's work, who was my advisor at Harvard. If you're interested in his work, you can look it up. But she's coordinating single reflexive things that we do, social and biological reflexes at once, into more and more complex skill units. More and more of them can be integrated together in the service of one goal. The arm waving and the vocalizing and the looking and the mirroring our mouths together and our facial expressions together all come together into a whole skill for playing with Grandma. Okay? And when you're a PhD level physicist, all your skills for representing the world come together in the service of understanding and inventing some massive new equation. It's exactly the same process, but the complexity scale becomes more and more developed. Does that make sense? So the skills you develop as an infant and as a child and as an adolescent and as a young adult and as an adult and as an older adult are constantly moving you into a possibility space of more and more complexity in accordance with the situation. And so what we're really doing when we educate people is teaching them to be able to coordinate pieces of knowledge, skills, abilities for thinking about and reflecting and feeling things into mind states that are more and more complex. Does that make sense? So as you can see, if you haven't noticed, cognition and emotion are really just they're two aspects of thinking. They're the same, there's two ways, two lights you can shine on what people do. But what people do is always, always, always both. It's always emotional and cognitive at the same time. There's no such thing as emotion without cognition or cognition without emotion. And where's the cognition here? Well, she's got an ability to, vocalize and stuff. That's cognitive, and to do this, it's the rudiments of language, right? But where's the emotion here? Well, clearly, she's doing it in order to chit-chat with her grandma, not just because, right? So it's always both. It's always both. And if we had time at the end of the day today, I'll show you a video from a course that we've just developed that just got released yesterday morning. It's free online, and I'll give you the link to it. It's a course funded by the Annenberg Media Foundation, a big to-do thing. It took us 1.5 years to put it together with the Harvard University Science Media Group. Basically, we made a course on learning in the brain for teachers. And one of the sort of featured scientific stories in there is a story of one of my students who did experiments with expert physicists. These are people who have postdoctoral level training in physics. And we compared them with expert mechanical engineers who know all about the physics of moving objects, but who use it to be able to design machines. They're not that interested in objects. What they're interested in is using it for something else. and novice physicists, who just people who have taken enough physics to understand basic things about how the world works, but that's not what they do. And what Guilherme did, was he did an experiment in which he showed people, he first hooked people to galvanic skin response software. So basically what we're doing is measuring their microscopic amounts of sweating on their fingertips, which is a marker of kind of physiological arousal, which is a piece of the emotion process, okay? And people are not consciously controlling that, and they're not aware of it. It's like microscopic amounts, right, of conductivity change in your finger. And he showed people depictions of objects moving in particular ways and said, which one of these represents the real world? Things fall out, airplanes going along, a ball falls out, it goes like this, it goes like that, it goes like this, you know what I mean, right? And he looked at, when people knew the answer, what happens to their GSR response? And what we found is that only expert physicists show a huge spike in GSR when they see the proper representation, the scientific representation of a moving object. It's as if non-consciously, automatically, without them even being aware, they show a little like, oh, that's my world. Like, that's how the world works. I love the physics of how the world works. That is me, right? The mechanical engineers don't show it, but we're now doing a set of experiments to see if they will show it if we show them simple machines. Like if we can get the, they say, that's a machine, that's a lever. I love levers. Levers are very useful, right? And the non-experts, even when they get it right, they don't show it. They show the same little GSR spike for everything. And they say, oh yeah, it's number 3. That's the way it goes, right? But they don't have that kind of emotional attachment to it. And what's the point of my story? The point of my story is that even though I'm talking about social stuff, this is not limited to the social world. This is how we learn things in general. This is what it means to have disciplinary knowledge. Your knowledge becomes more and more abstract. It's more and more disciplined in the sense of being of Howard Gardner, right? Being in a domain with tools for thinking in that domain. But the reason you do it at all is tied to your emotional connection with that material. And that emotional connection becomes divorced from your social relationships over time. Sure, it becomes specialized into domain-specific knowledge. The physics knowledge and the guy's girlfriend relationship are not the same thing anymore. But as an infant and all the way up, the reason why he became attached to physics is by virtue of, I would argue, by virtue of the same biological mechanisms that allow him to enter into social relationships and to appreciate the world in other ways. That make sense? Yeah, and there are a lot of scientists who would argue with me about that. But, I'll just, yes?
Does it start off by me liking the physics teacher?
By who? Sorry?
Does that start off by me liking this physics?
By you liking the physics teacher. Well, okay, so it kind of depends. Do you have to like your physics teacher? Not necessarily, but you do have to be empathic with the person. So by empathic, I don't mean you have to be all huggy and smushy and like ask everybody how their day went. I mean, some people are like that. And when you're with little kids, you have to be like that, right? Everybody knows you can't get away with not being like that with little kids. They'll just be all over the walls climbing up, right? But when we get to high school and young adults and adults, we think, what they're really doing is compensating for our poor teaching by sitting in their chair when we don't make connections with them. But now the connections can be disciplinary connections. They're abstract connections. So I don't have to like you as a person. I do, but that's beside the point. I don't have to like you as a person, but what I do have to do is empathize with, in other words, connect with your goal of teaching me physics. I need to want to learn physics and to think about the physical world the way you do. And that's where the empathy goes. It's no longer about my home life. It becomes more and more disciplinary, but it's the same process. Does that make sense? So now I'm going to show you an example of a guy who is reacting to one of these stories in our experiment. This is a compassion story. And I'm showing you this to help you to appreciate both the psychological components of a complex emotion response that you learn from, arguably, in the real world, and how those reflect exactly what we've been talking about so far, self and the body, and meaning-making and knowledge about the situation. All of those things, you need all of those things to be able to build a complex mental state. And I'm also showing it to you I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. Yeah, so that's why I'm basically showed to you. I'm showing it to you to demonstrate these pieces. And the other piece, sorry, is, it's been a long week, is to show you that the very same sort of empathic resonance that you see from an hour and a half and 3.5 pounds old in Nina that like connects with me, we're human beings here, right? Show me how to have a regulated physiology when I freak out. You know, and you say, shh, baby, shh, 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 this is how we breathe, shh. And, you know, feel my heart, right? This is how hearts go when you're just being a normal person. No need to be freaking, you know, just let's just calm it back down. Let me share my physiological regulation with you. And then later, it's let me share my physics knowledge with you so that you can organize your mind state around it, like I am. Okay, it's the same process. But what I'm showing here is that empathic resonance that starts the moment you're born is the same basic process that allows you to engage with the world when you're an adult. Just like I've been saying, that same kind of resonance is transposed, it's developed into more and more complex forms, but it's the basic foundation on which we engage with material and learn things. So that's what I want you to see. So let's just listen to him. Oh, I need to tell you a little bit about the story that he's reacting to so you can make sense of his response. So again, another true story. This is from a cross-cultural version of the experiment, which we ran in Beijing Normal University and University of Southern California, which are very well-matched universities, both urban, both same socioeconomic level of students, both equally difficult and competitive to get into, that kind of thing, but one's in China and one's in the US, and we did comparisons between the students, and it's amazing how many interesting differences there are. But anyway, we'll talk about that toward the end if we have time. But he's reacting to a story from China, because half the stories in that experiment are from China, half of them are about Americans. They're all true. So he's reacting to a story in China about, it's a little bit complicated and convoluted, so just follow me here. So he has just watched a videotape. No actors, nothing like that, it's all real. He's just watched a videotape of a young man in China who's a university student watch a videotape. So he's watching the guy watch a videotape of his mom, and the story is that that young man in China was born during an economic depression, during a time when work was very hard to get and things were very scarce. And when he was an infant, his dad passed away, so it was just him and his mom. And his mom basically had to work 2 jobs as a laborer to be able to even keep food on the table for them, and sometimes she couldn't. And she really, really struggled to be able to raise him, but he always told her when he was a little boy, I'm going to work really hard, and then someday I'll be able to give you a comfortable life, Mom, and stuff. And he did really well in school, and then he went on to university, and during his first semester at university, his mom passed away. She was just tired from her life. And he went on studying, doing well, and he just, by chance, made a friend who was studying documentary filmmaking. And by chance, this friend of his was making, for a course project, a film about the conditions in that urban city in China during that economic depression. And he unearthed from the university archives an interview with his friend's mom, explaining what it was like to raise him when he was a child. Of course, she had never told him about this videotape, or she didn't want him to know this as a child. But she had done an interview with someone about what her situation was, and he's watching that for the first time. And she's telling the story of how one day he was a little boy, he had had nothing to eat since 6:30 in the morning. He had some rice soup, and then at 3:30 in the afternoon she was going to pick him up from school. It was winter time and snowing and cold, and she had no money to buy him anything to take him there to eat when she picked him up. And how she felt walking to his school knowing that she had no food for him. And as she was walking, she saw something glittering in the snow, and it was a coin, and she describes noticing that and picking it up and realizing that it was like a 25-cent piece and that she could use this to buy warm cakes for him. And so she buys these 6 cakes that are warm, and she wraps them up inside her coat, and she goes to school to get them, and she describes his face as he comes out and says, "What's wrong? Do you have a stomach ache?" And she says, "No, no," and she shows him the cakes and the look on his face when he sees them, and he starts eating them and saying how delicious they are, and then by the last one he stops and says, "But Mom, you haven't had any cakes." And she says, "Oh, no, 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 these are the ones I saved for you. I already ate mine." And he said, "Oh, good, because I'm so hungry," and they're so delicious, and he eats the last one. And so what this guy has just watched is a videotape of the young man in China whose mother's passed away, watching his mom tell this story for the first time. Okay? So it's a compassion-inducing stimulus. By the way, I don't tell the participants in my experiments anything about what emotions we're aiming to study, because I don't want to have people tell me what I want to hear, right? I just say, here's a story. How does this make you feel? Here's another story about a lady in Sudan. How does it make you feel? And they just tell me how they feel, and that's it. And we have videotapes, honestly, obviously, of that. Okay, so this is him reacting to that story. Here's my mouse. Here we go. So I say, how does this make you feel?
This is the one that's hit me the most, I suppose. And I'm not very good at like verbalizing emotions. I don't know, I think my brain is just not wired that way. But I can always feel like physical sensations. So this one is like there's a balloon or something just under my sternum, like inflating and moving like up and out, which I don't know, is like my sign of something really touching. And so like the selflessness the selflessness of the mother, and then also of the little boy, you know, having these like wonderful cakes that he never gets to have, and it's still like offering them to her, and then her turning them down is, and it makes me think about like my parents, because they provided me with so much, and I don't thank them enough. I know I don't.